Don't you need my brainwaves for camouflage or something? I'll be okay.
Welcome back, ScreenRanters! With Season 4 of Rick and Morty just around the corner, we thought we'd bring you a funny theory. You're welcome. This theory involves the mysterious Evil Morty. Who is he? Is he a Rick? How? Why? What does he want? Well, we aim to get your creative brain juices flowing and answer some of these questions. And when we say answer, we actually mean speculate with convincing evidence. So, before we waffle on any further, let's get cracking on this elusive mystery. Rick and Morty regularly tackle problems on their interdimensional travels. Sometimes they even cause a few problems themselves. One of these problems revolves around science and science fiction. Rick is shown as the scientific genius and a moral granddad, with Morty being the dim but moral grandson. One of the concepts the show has showcased is the multiverse theory, which means that Earths almost like ours exist, but with some differences. Meaning there's a multiverse where DC is the film lords of superhero films instead of Marvel, for example. With that idea, we get to see a whole range of different variations of Rick and Morty. We're so lucky. A whole crew of Rick and Morty variations live on a large Citadel. They were ruled over by a council of Ricks, until C-137 Rick destroyed them all, that is. Random fact of the day for you, the Council of Ricks is actually a parody of the Council of Reeds from a Fantastic Four story. Haha, ScreenRant. A great source of pop culture knowledge. Anyway, back on topic. One of the more infamous alternate Rick and Morty variations comes in the form of Evil Morty. Wow, that was dramatic? To refresh your memory, Evil Morty first popped up in the episode Close Rick Encounters of the Rick Kind. In this episode, our Rick of Sector C-137 is accused of eliminating other Ricks across the multiverse, so he gets arrested by other Ricks. He escapes and goes on a mission with Morty to find the person responsible. It turns out an evil Rick framed C-137. He even built a massive dome of Mortys being tortured. Wow, that's nightmarish. He captured all the Mortys that didn't have a Rick, either through his genocidal means or just by the chance that they were Rickless. But it was an evil Rick that did all this. At the end of the episode, evil Rick is defeated by a load of the captured Mortys. A couple of police Ricks inspect the beaten body. They discover a load of wires inside his head connected to a receiver. It turns out that evil Rick was actually being controlled by his eye patch wearing Morty. Every disturbing action and word come from the Morty. The eye patch was actually hiding the transmitter, but Evil Morty disposes of the eye patch before walking off with all the Rickless Mortys. He's never to be seen again. Not really. He would return. Evil Morty's return came in the episode The Ricklantis Mix-Up, otherwise known as The Tales from the Citadel. The episode takes a look at how different Ricks and Mortys go about their business on the Citadel. It highlighted the ever-growing divide between the two groups. With the Council of Ricks all perishing, the Citadel was running a presidential election. One of the candidates was a Morty. Originally, he was only included as a candidate because the Ricks found it adorable. Oh boy, would they come to regret that? Eventually, he wins the election on the promise of uniting Ricks and Mortys. Immediately, he becomes a dictator and eliminates all competition and those that disrespect him. Another Morty would uncover who this Morty really is. This obviously reveals President Morty to be the evil version. Now that we're up to date, let's dive in with the theory. What if Evil Morty was actually a Rick? It would make sense. He acts so different from other Mortys. Usually they're loyal, dim, and insecure. Evil Morty acts more like a Rick, even demonstrating an inflated ego at times. Something that Ricks often do. We know so little information about this psychotic Morty. We don't know his history, the reason behind his plans, or where he came from. If the internet likes anything, it's theorizing a TV show. There's an alternate theory that Evil Morty is the original Morty of Rick C-137 as well. That all his actions are for revenge. Either way, Evil Morty is a hotspot of speculation due to his mysterious nature. But today's theory really gets the cogs in our noggins going. Rick is usually shown as being cynical, amoral, and a genius. He does have a more caring side to him, especially when it comes to his daughter Beth. On occasion, his caring side extends to his grandchildren, but he tends to keep it buried deep down most of the time. buried really, really far down. On the whole, Rick tends to be rather reckless when it comes to their Mortys. They regularly manipulate them into experiments or putting them in grave danger. Just being granddads, really. Ricks are also a big fan of alcohol, like massive, unhealthy fans. Besides from tiny exemptions, like Doofus Rick, more on that beautiful fellow later, all other Ricks share this similar, often destructive personality. Evil Morty is shown as being calculating, confident, and a genius. He was able to create a device to control a Rick, not something a normal Morty would do. His genius was also highlighted when he ran for election. He knew exactly what to do in order to win, even arrogantly praising his own ability along the way. He played both sides and appealed to them in just the right way, giving the impression of a political unifier. Rick C-137 has regularly shown his apathy for the other Ricks. Whenever they're around, he'll roll his eyes and often be hostile towards them. Who else has little regard for Ricks? That's right, Evil Morty. Like we mentioned earlier, Ricks like to drink. As soon as Evil Morty is elected as president and eliminates the competition of Ricks, he pours himself some alcohol. Considering Mortys are meant to be 14 years old, he's a little young to be drinking. Sure, he could be just trying it out, but he's easily downing some whiskey. That's quite a strong liquor to just try out with. It seems like he's had a lot of experience when it comes to drinking, as though he's a lot older, say 70 years old? When C-137 Rick sees the dome of Morty's, he mentions to his horrified Morty that he came up with the same idea. Essentially, Morty's brainwaves counteract Rick's, which makes them undetectable to others except from other Ricks. With all of those Mortys being harmed simultaneously, evil Rick and Morty would be hidden from everyone. So they both share a similar dark genius. Only difference is C-137 hasn't acted on his theory due to how barbaric it is. At least that we know of. Going back to when Evil Morty was Eyepatch Morty, he chats to C-137 Morty before leading him into a room full of captured Mortys. Wow, the amount of times that we gotta say Rick and Morty's names. Anyway, Evil Morty mentions that no Morty could defeat a Rick.
Mortys have no chance of defeating a Rick.
Considering he shows time and time again that he can beat a Rick, was he lying to hide his master plan, or perhaps he was being literal, as he isn't actually a Morty? During his election campaign, Evil Morty refers to another Morty as a young man, even though they're meant to be the same age. During the same episode, one Rick repeats the same phrase to another Rick. These interactions showed that both EM and Ricks have similar personalities. Are we reading too much into one exact same phrase? We don't think so. Later in the episode, as the presser interviewing Evil Morty as part of his campaign, he's asked a simple question: "Where's your Rick?" Which seems to fluster EM. He pretends to be dim by stating they moved around a lot, so it was difficult to keep track, before saying, "I see every Rick as my Rick," and dodging the question completely. People that dodge from questions like that are usually hiding something. Our Sherlock senses are tingling. How could EM be a Rick though? It's a weird concept, sure, but it's not above the abilities of Rick Sanchez. As shown in the episode Big Trouble in Little Sanchez, Rick has the means to transfer his consciousness. He was able to clone a younger body of himself and transfer his consciousness into his new body known as Tiny Rick. At the end of the episode, he's easily able to move his mind back into his normal body. Now, in theory, Rick could replicate this transference with another being, say a Morty. As mentioned earlier, Morty's brainwaves are really useful for Ricks. However, in order for the cloaking effect to work, they would need a Morty around all the time. For most Ricks, this isn't a bad thing, but for a Rick who's a little darker, a little more psychotic, it could be a problem. So the next best thing for them is to inhabit a Morty body. They get all the benefits of the brainwaves from the biology, but with the added benefit of Rick's own consciousness. Perhaps that's another reason that EM was using a wall of tortured Mortys to hide. Maybe he was testing out alternative methods in case he wanted to be Rick again. But if the theory is right, what happened to the Morty? Well, we have a couple of theories on that too. Firstly, let's take a look at Investigator Rick. This Rick was the trenchcoat coat-wearing Rick that met with campaign manager Morty. After that, Morty was fired by Evil Morty. Investigator Rick provided him with evidence of who EM really is. Sadly, the evidence was lost when the campaign manager was put in an airlock. We see him float around space with photos of the new president wearing his previous eye patch. This Investigator Rick could be the Morty that was switched. Perhaps Rick was sentimental and decided to keep Morty alive, so he switched bodies completely. But now, Investigator Rick needed to bring down Evil Morty, only he doesn't have the means to immediately go public, so he needs to be subtle in bringing the monster down, only for EM to find out his plan and dispose of him in the vacuum of space along with many other victims. It could even be related to why Evil Morty goes on a Rick-destroying rampage. All the Ricks that bite the dust may actually have the capabilities to figure out who Evil Morty actually is. Perhaps they knew him before the body swap, or perhaps they have an experience with a similar situation. Either way, Evil Morty cleaned house in a big way. Another idea looks at the Morty's usual intelligence. Basically, they're not very bright. Are there any not so clever Ricks that come to mind? Well, if you thought of Doofus Rick, then congrats. He made his debut in the same episode that Evil Morty did. Coincidence? Yeah, we don't think so. Anyway, as we saw with his introduction, Doofus Rick is very different to all other Ricks. He's not as bright as them, and he's also caring, as we saw with his interactions with Jerry, something that the other Ricks bully him for. Doofus Rick's personality contains common traits that Morty's possess. Doofus Rick could have been Evil Morty's original body. By using some nefarious means, he caused the Mortys in Rick's body to forget what happened. Considering the amount of brain-manipulating devices on the show, it's not a bizarre possibility. Evil Morty may have taken some sort of twisted pleasure in keeping his Morty around in some capacity. He's definitely evil enough to enjoy that. Evil is literally in his fan-created name. Rick C-137 is shown to be a major threat to Evil Morty. Firstly, he tries to frame Rick for his massacre of Ricks. When that doesn't work, he instead attempts to get his controlled Rick to off C-137 Rick. It's a big possibility that Evil Morty holds some form of grudge against Rick. Perhaps Rick wronged Evil Morty in the past? Say when Evil Morty was still a Rick? Or maybe it's not a personal reason. Instead, it could be that this Rick, the self-entitled Rickest Rick, may be a threat to Evil Morty's plan. He could bring down all his plans, so he tries to nip that in the bud by taking him out of the picture, just like he did with the other Ricks. At some point, we'll hopefully get the answers to this question: who is Evil Morty? With the new season, we'll probably see Evil Morty pop up again. He's a rather compelling character. Now that he controls one of the most technologically advanced areas of the multiverse, he has a huge amount of power and resources. He has all the means and ability to wreak havoc for not only C-137 Rick and Morty, but all Rick and Mortys. And cut. So what did you think of this little theory? Did it blow your mind? Or do you fancy picking holes in it instead? Either way, drop your thoughts into the comments section below. Remember to subscribe and click the bell to stay up to date on ScreenRant content, especially with all of our Rick and Morty content. It's fab. Anyway, thanks for joining us today, you gorgeous people. We'll see you next time.